Hi, I'm Katie, and I'm an out attorney.
Hello, Out Bosses. Rhodes Perry here, and welcome to this week's episode of The Out Entrepreneur, a weekly podcast where I get to interview today's most inspiring LGBTQ bosses crushing it in business. And on this week's episode, we are welcoming Katie Lane, who is joining us from Portland, Oregon. So So welcome to the show, Katie.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. So are you ready to inspire fellow out bosses?
Well, I guess the only answer is yes.
Of course, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Awesome.
Let's do it.
Yes, let's do it. Okay. So a little bit about Katie. Katie is an attorney and negotiation coach who helps creators protect their rights and get paid fairly for their work. Her clients include comic creators, game designers, authors, illustrators, and musicians. Katie loves teaching people how to negotiate, reading contracts with a red pen, bow ties, and Star Trek.
These are things.
These are amazing things.
I love them.
Yes. And I think I need some help with probably negotiating and reading contracts. So I'm sure there's other folks out in the audience who could benefit from your services. So super, super excited. So why not kick us off and tell us a little bit more about your business and what makes it unique?
Okay. So I started almost 9 years ago writing a blog, and the entire purpose of the blog was I was tired of going to dinner parties or hanging out with my friends and hearing them talk about how they had done this job for a client and the client wasn't paying them, or they had done this job for the client, they had signed this contract, they thought everything was fine, and it turns out it was awful. And most of my clients were in comics or illustrators, they were writers, and so the fact that it was creative work, for whatever reason, made them feel like they had less of an ability to stand up for themselves. You know, this person is in business, big business. They know business things. And they were just a little artist and they didn't know. And I really was frustrated with that dynamic. So I would say over dinner, no, okay, you're going to go and you're going to say these three things and you're not going to take this any longer. And if they, try to push you around, you're just going to say no. And here's how you say it. Here's what you say. And I got tired of repeating myself. So I started writing the blog.
Yes.
And then after a while, people were asking if I could represent them because I was an attorney at the time. I was just doing a different kind of job. And I kept saying no. And then finally I was like, well, let's just try it out. Let's try it. So I started my practice actually part-time while I still had my day job. Because I had a day job that didn't interfere with it, I could represent artists on the side and there wouldn't be a conflict. So nights and weekends for about 2.5 years. And it was really a chance for me to see, does this business model work? Mm-hmm. Do I like it as much as I think I do? Because there's liking something when it is an idea, and then there's liking something when you are doing it all the time.
Yes.
And I found I did like it. There were a lot of clients. It was satisfying work. It was work where it was plentiful. And so I started saving money, and my wife and I started paying off debt and getting ready for me to go full time because she's a cartoonist and a writer. And we knew that if we were both going to be self-employed, we had to make sure that the finances were in order before I jumped ship, as it were.
Yeah.
So April of 2014 is when I left my day job.
Wow. Okay.
April 4th.
So 9 years ago, you were writing your blog. Mm-hmm. You were creating content that was just repetitive, great advice that you were giving at dinner parties.
Great advice. Right? The Katie Lane story.
Yeah. I love it. Right? And there's so many people who start out that way of just finding our voices through blogging or through podcasting or whatever it might be, just consistently showing up and doing the thing. And that's what you were doing. And you were doing that for 2.5 years, or what was the point where you were writing the blog and then you realized I want to do this as kind of a side hustle in addition to doing my full-time job?
Well, it was probably 3 years into blogging and maintaining the website. And during that time, my wife goes to comic book conventions to sell comic books. Yeah. And so I would go with her and work the table. And then I started just submitting ideas for talks at the con. So I'll do a panel or I'll do a workshop. And I got into that, which was a more interactive way of providing that advice. I got to see, oh wait, people do actually really like this. And so I did that probably without being a lawyer for creatives. I did that for probably 3.5 or 4 years before I started doing it on the side. And I was terrified of the idea of doing it on the side.
Yeah.
I was like, this is too big. It's going to require too much. It's going to be overwhelming. I'm very much, I don't know if it's the lawyer part of me or just a built-in anxiety, but I tend to have a bad habit of like, it will be this perfect way or it will be trash.
Yeah.
And I really had to push myself into being like, well, no, let's experiment. Let's see what it's like.
Yeah.
If you hate it, you can stop.
Yeah.
That's okay. But if you like it, you could maybe keep going and find out that you get to do other things that you like.
Yeah.
But that was something my wife was trying to talk me into for a long time. And finally, when I did it, I was like, hey, Dylan, guess what I found out? She was like, yep.
Yeah. I love what you were talking about where you have this idea and you like the idea and just kind of like playing around with the side hustle of like, do I like the idea when I'm executing it? And I think that that's a really important distinction. Because for many of us entrepreneurs, we have an idea every half a second, right? So it's like just deciding like, okay, this is the idea we're going to commit to for longer than like 30 seconds. You know what I mean? And I think that that's really smart. And something else that I was like picking up is that it seems like you have this dynamic duo with your partner, right? Where it's like you almost have this instant flow of clients coming to you because you've targeted largely creative entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty darn lucky. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So when I went to law school, I knew I wanted to work with artists and freelancers, but I couldn't figure out how to make that work because there weren't like a lot of firms with really well-paying jobs that were like, please just work with artists. And it took meeting Dylan and her sort of talking me into doing the thing that I knew I wanted to do for me to actually figure out how to make it work. So yeah, no, I'm incredibly lucky to have met her and to have her be my partner.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've walked us through a little bit about your origin stories here for your business. And you mentioned that full-time you started 2014, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or around there.
Yeah.
At that point, what was going on with your full-time job? Did you kind of say, you're going to step off and do your own thing because the side hustle was succeeding? Or were there elements taking place at work where you felt like you're trying to fit into a workplace culture that doesn't quite get all of your genius and what you want to contribute? Or was it just purely like the side hustle is super successful and I'm just going to step out and do the thing?
I think it was a couple things. I was very compelled by the side hustle. When I wasn't doing that work, I wanted to do that work. When I was at the day job, I was thinking in the back of my head about the business and what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And my day job wasn't the best fit for me. It was a nice place. I had a nice boss. I had actually a really supportive boss who knew about the side hustle and was like, hey, as long as it doesn't interfere with your work here, I don't care. So I was lucky in the sense that I had a really good boss, but the job was not the best job for my skills and abilities. Yeah. So it wasn't a difficult decision from the point of view of, oh, here's this thing I enjoy doing and I really like. It was more, here's this thing that I'm doing purely for the money. It is not how I most enjoy spending my time compared to here's this thing that I really love doing, but I don't have enough time to do. Mm-hmm. So what happens if we get rid of the thing that you're not enjoying, get rid of the day job and really fully commit to the business? What does that look like?
Yeah.
And so we are on year 4 of the experiment of what that looks like.
I love it. And so year 4, you've got 4 years of just kind of seeing the trends in your business. And I'm curious right now, what's the one thing that has you most inspired about doing the work that you're doing for all of the creators out there that are running their own businesses?
I work with a lot of people in comics, and comics has changed dramatically over the last 4 years, but over the last 10 years in particular. And part of that change has been due to things like crowdfunding and the fact that with the internet, we now have, if you're willing to hunt and peck, you can find the resources to do things that in the past you've depended on publishers or other entities for doing. Plus, we're also seeing in comics independent publishers who are recognizing this and instead of being intimidated by it, really embracing it and saying, oh, okay, you've got this this thing, you've already tested it out with a Kickstarter, and you've been able to show that you can raise enough money to do a first print run. Great. Now we'll take it and we'll let you use our buying power to print the next run of books, and our marketing. We're going to take, our cut for doing that. But it's allowing creators to access these resources that earlier they didn't have access to.
Yeah.
Or they did have access to, but it was a very complicated road, and there wasn't a lot of information about how to get there and who wins and who loses. So I'm really inspired by the fact that right now, if you want to, as an independent creator, you have access to an incredible amount of information. And rather than having to have someone give you permission to move forward, you can take the risk and make your way forward. It is not easy, but there are a lot more resources out there and a lot more people willing to share their experiences than there were in the past. And so I'm really excited that I get to help people do what they love. To a certain extent, I get to help people take that same risk and experience that I got to take.
Yeah.
And that is incredibly satisfying, because that's why I get up in the morning, because I get to help people do what they want to do.
So on that and helping entrepreneurs do what they do best, what might be one thing that our audience could benefit from with your areas of expertise and contracts in particular, right? Or I don't know, the first thing that pops up for you that might be transferable to the creative entrepreneurs out there, as well as maybe more folks in kind of, I don't know, tech startups or whatever it might be. Like what might be something that we could benefit from your expertise?
I was having a conversation with a friend about this the other day. I think the thing that sometimes we worry about when we're just starting out is not wanting things to get too legal or businessy too fast, right? Like we want to keep it loose. We like that we're working with friends and making cool stuff, which I totally get. I like working with my friends and making cool stuff too. The risk I think that you face in that, though, is that you can get pretty far down the road before you've sat down to talk about, what do you own? What do I own? What happens if? Who's going to pay whom when? What does done look like? What happens if one of us decides to walk away? Can the other person keep working on it? And I think, granted, I'm biased. I'm a lawyer.
Yes.
I'm a contract nerd. But I think that you can let the contract bear the stress of that rather than your relationship. When you work without a contract and something comes up later on, you are depending on the relationship to bear the stress of that conflict. Whereas if you have a contract, even if you have a bad contract, don't have a bad contract, have a good one. But even if you have a bad contract, the contract can bear the stress of the conflict before the relationship has to. Yes. Because there's something that you can both look to and say, well, what were we thinking at the time? And how did we think we wanted to handle this? And that, I think, allows you to better protect those relationships. So I think part of it is we avoid contracts because we are avoiding the conversation that contracts require us to have, which is a conversation that requires us to consider, what happens if this doesn't work out the way that I want it to? And that can feel like negative thinking. Yeah. It's not.
Yeah.
It's just planning.
Yeah.
It's just experimenting. Like, think of it in terms of like, okay, what happens if everything catches on fire? Do I want to have a fire extinguisher? Yes? No. That's not negative thinking. That's really just planning to protect the investment of your energy, your time, and this great idea that you love that you want to see if it goes somewhere.
Sure. And I think if you are, say you're trying to enter a relationship with a partner, a business partner, and if you can't have those difficult conversations early on in the beginning, that's a sure sign that maybe that's not the right person to go into business with, right? Because in some ways, it's like a marriage plus some, right?
Totally.
And
so it's the ability to say, I respect you enough to have this difficult conversation with you. I respect you enough to be uncomfortable.
Yes. Yeah.
And that is, that's showing a huge amount of vulnerability. So I get why people don't like doing it, right? And the other thing I'll say is that, it doesn't have to be super high stakes for everything. Mm-hmm. It can just be a conversation.
Yes.
Of what do you want to do? Okay. When should we check back in? All right. Cool. But having those conversations and having that documented, it helps so much as you move forward. Because even if everything works out perfectly, you're like, cool, what's the next step?
Yep.
Let's look at the contract. Does it still make sense? Yes. Great. Let's do that. Does it no longer make sense? Great. Let's change it. Like
Yes.
you are able to do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we go to kind of the next segment of the interview, I wanted to check in with you on just how you're structuring your workplace. And for folks who listen to my show, part of my business is focusing in on workplace culture. And so I'm curious for you, especially because you had mentioned that the last job that you had when you were working for someone else, you didn't really feel like you fit in.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like what might be one thing that you're doing to create a culture of belonging for either, the clients that you're working with, maybe if you contract out some work, if you have staff, I don't know if you do or not. How do you think about culture proactively and kind of creating something that demonstrates your commitment to, inclusivity?
I have worked in a lot of different ways over the course of working for myself, and I have found things that work really well for me and things that don't. I have learned things about how my brain works that I thought I should have known. Turns out I didn't. And so I have found that I enjoy working around other people. It helps me work. It helps me pay attention to what I'm doing, but it also helps me remember that my way isn't the only way. I think one of the reasons that the people I tend to work with, my clients, avoid lawyers or avoid business advice is because they assume that they will be judged for what they've done or how they've done it. And so it's very important to me that I always am respectful of their process. And we all make mistakes. I make mistakes every day. We're really good at making mistakes. But it's not about shaming anybody for those mistakes. It's about saying, okay, well, how'd that happen? And can we fix it? And, what are our options right now? And one of the things that I have found is that by working around other people, and I've worked in a couple of different co-working spaces where I am working with creators. Mm-hmm. So I rent a desk, but the person next to me is writing or is a journalist or is making games. And that has helped me see just how people spend their days, what they do, what they think about, like when we all get up and go grab a cup of coffee in the break room, what are we talking about? So I have found that to be beneficial. And I've found communities in those situations where inclusivity is expected. Yeah. Like it's not even necessarily really a rule. It's just like, oh, if you don't like that, don't come.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like I know that is a community for me when the expectation is people are welcome here and they are welcome to be themselves. And if that is uncomfortable for you in any way, that's fine. But this is not the right place for you to spend time. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of the default culture where you're at. And are you in a co-working space? Or?
Right now I am working with because I had been working with creators for such a long time, I was feeling distant from the legal community. And there was an attorney that I met and became friends with, and he ended up having space in his office and asked if I wanted to join. And I was like, yeah, it would be nice to be able to talk to somebody about, man, this contract's really frustrating because X, Y, and Z, and not have somebody be like, yes, that sounds frustrating. Because, people try to be attentive, but there is nothing quite like getting to vent with somebody who knows your work.
Yep.
That is incredibly I think it's emotionally important, but I also think it's a really helpful learning device because I can vent and be like, this is so frustrating. And sometimes he's like, well, but that's because of this reason. Or have you thought of doing it this way? And so instead of, I think one of the risks that entrepreneurs have is we want to do everything ourselves. We're really motivated to do it ourselves, but that means that we can get stuck in our head and stuck with only our own ideas, which are nice. Yeah. They're great ideas, really pretty ideas, but they're not the only ideas.
Yep.
And maybe they're not the best idea for what it is you're tackling in the moment.
Yeah. And I think you're speaking of the value of finding some kind of collaboration with folks within your industry. And you were lucky enough to find that with your office mate.
Very lucky.
There's other ways that we can do that through masterminds or, online communities. And so including the Out Entrepreneur community. So there's a plug for that in Facebook. So right now we're going to take a quick sponsorship break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more with Katie and get to know her.
Aspiring out bosses, are you struggling with taking that first entrepreneurial leap? Does the imposter syndrome prevent you from getting started? Have you considered seeking support, but you're just not sure where to turn? Look no further. The Out Entrepreneur now offers a coaching and mentorship program where you can access support and strategies to shift your mindset from employee to entrepreneur. If you're looking for accountability and a mentor who successfully busted out of the 9-to-5 lifestyle, let's schedule a time to talk today. Visit www.outentrepreneur.com and look for show notes from today's episode to schedule a call. Again, the URL is www.outentrepreneur.com. Together, let's welcome you to the wonderful world of being an out boss.
So, Katie, now we're going to jump into one of my favorite parts of the interview where we get to talk about our rainbow superpowers and some of the challenges of being a part of the LGBT community when it comes to business. And so I'm hoping that you can take us back to a time, we're going to start off with some of the challenges, right? Mm-hmm. So if you could take us back to a time in business, right, where it may have been difficult to work with a client or maybe with a contractor just to be fully 100% out in your LGBT identity. And if you can think about that time or an example, how did you work around it? I think that's going to give some of our audience members some confidence around how authentic they can be in their own work.
Absolutely. So I am one of those people that there was really never a question as to whether or not I was gay. I was a tiny lesbian, grew up to be an adult lesbian. And so my being out or not out has never been something that I felt like I had control over. Mm-hmm. Like even after I came out, I was like, oh wait, everybody knew. Cool. And so to a certain extent, by the time I entered the working world, I kind of knew like, well, either people are going to know or they're not, and we'll deal with it as it comes. In the day job that I left before I became a lawyer, it was a more conservative place. Yeah. And so it was me paying attention to the people in the room and the people that I was working with and how they felt or what I was picking up from them when we would work together. I can't remember like any outstanding issues where I was like, wow, this is you're just uncomfortable with gay people. You're not reacting to the work I'm doing. You just don't like me because I'm gay. Yeah. I don't have any of those like standout times, but I definitely had times where people were not as open, weren't sharing as much information, were more willing to make assumptions. Yeah. And I kind of decided at a certain point in time, like, oh, I can't help you with that insecurity. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. Like, it's not. I feel bad because it's not really helpful advice, but my advice is like boundaries. Yeah. If somebody contacts me and they are uncomfortable about me being gay, which would be shocking because very gay, like that's just not the right person for me to work with. I have no problem telling you no because you're not going to be comfortable. I'm not going to be comfortable because I'm going to be distracted from what I'm doing because you're paying attention to something else that I'm not sure how it fits in.
So I have a follow-up question. So you had mentioned that you really pay, like, especially when you were working for your last employer, you were paying attention to either nonverbals or how people respond to you. Maybe if you're talking about your family or whatever the thing might be. Do you notice that popping up with maybe people that are being referred to you? Are you like for new clients, are you using those kind of same skills just to kind of flesh out like, is this person really like my ideal client or not? And like, what are some of those skills like what you're paying attention to?
One of the things I try to do is I try to make it really clear that I'm inclusive. Yeah. So if that's going to throw you off in some way, or we're just not going to work well together. Like I have a inquiry form that I have people fill out when they want me to review a contract for them. And one of the first questions it asks are, what are your pronouns? Mm-hmm. And because that's helpful, right? Like, yes. I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to accidentally be a jerk. So to avoid accidentally being a jerk, just going to ask. And I have had like one or two people like react oddly to that. Yeah. And so it was really easy to be like, nope, all full up. Don't have time. Yes. Have a nice day.
Nice. Yeah.
It didn't, I didn't make it a bigger issue than that, but it was a way of saying, I have these tools built into my process that say, I am welcome, I am opening, I am inclusive, I don't have time for the crap.
Yeah. Yes.
And so it makes it easier to spot when people try to push back on that, for me to say like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I
You're
can't
like,
work with
funny.
you.
Like my schedule's completely full now. Yeah.
I have no time.
Yeah. I mean, that's a great example. Thank you for sharing that. It's just like one of those kind of simple hacks that just filters out people that may be kind of more of a nightmare client or a less ideal client, right?
Like, so I came out in high school and I was in the South, and I was lucky to a certain extent because there's some gay adults in my life. And so I had access to people, but I also put up with a lot of crap.
Yeah.
And I put up with a lot of crap in college. Not a ton, but some enough where by the time I got to working, I was like, I don't have time for this any longer.
Yeah.
If you're going to be upset, you can be upset over in the corner.
Yeah. It reminds me, I'm reading this book right now called Don't Be Nice, Be Real. And so it's like you spent enough time in high school and college, just surviving, right? Yeah. In a lot of respects. And now it's just like you're at a point where you have a successful business and you're able to do the work and work with the clients you want to work with. And so, thank you for walking us through, just kind of how you do that, because I do think that that's inspiring for other people who tune into the show. So I'd like to, now talk about our superpowers as a LGBT community. And I'm curious, from your lived experiences growing up in the South, we were talking before the interview, you grew up in Columbia, South Carolina.
Yep.
So not the easiest place to be out in high school.
Yeah.
I mean, that's huge. So, from all of those lived experiences and, just living your life these days, do you believe that helps you kind of stand out as a business owner? And if so, what are some of those skills that you've gleaned from just living your life to applying in business today?
I think one of the things that those experiences taught me is that I like being myself best. I don't like being the hidden self, the part where I am trying to appease somebody else. That is uncomfortable. I don't work well in those situations. They sap my energy. I'm not able to be as creative. I am happiest when I am myself. And I am a silly person. I'm gay. I'm silly. I love bow ties. I'm wearing a bow tie right now. The radio
fabulous.
cannot thank you very much. I like really loud shoes. I like lots of colors. I love Star Trek. Would you like to talk about French bulldogs? And so one of the ways that it comes through is that I am just me. And that is a way, again, of if that bothers you, then you're probably not going to talk to me. And that's fine. That's good for both of us. Yay. But the other thing that I noticed that it does is that it empowers other people to be themselves. So my clients often tell me that it's easy to talk to me, or they feel like I'm approachable because they come to me knowing I like comics, or I'm a big silly person with, the squishy inside. And so they know what to expect, and that allows them to be more confident when they're working with me, because they don't feel like they have to prove themselves to somebody else. So, and loud, squishy, whatever is not everybody, but that's fine. I think as long as you are who you are when you are doing your work, that is the best self that you can bring, but that's also the best chance for you to do your best work and find the people that you want to work with and that want to work with you.
Yeah. I think I just want to use that clip every time I'm going into a business, just to be like, this is what happens when you allow your people to be themselves. Right?
So I teach negotiation, and one of the things that I talk to people about that they get really nervous about is no. They get really nervous about hearing no. What if I ask for that and they say no? And I always try to shift the perspective on that. And I ask, okay, if somebody said that you could not do X, would you want to work with them? And usually the answer is, well, no, because then I can't do X and I'm really good at X. Why wouldn't you want me to do X? And I was like, okay, so that's what no means. No means I am not your person. I am not your client. I am not the right business partner. It doesn't mean you're bad or you've asked for too much or, you're somehow greedy. It just means I am not the right fit for you. Yeah. Okay, thanks for telling me. I can go invest my energy somewhere else. That's how I feel about being yourself in business. Is if somebody says no to that, they're just saying that they're not the right person for me, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you find your no, it closes that conversation down with that prospective client, and it opens it up to so many other people that you're just gonna be in alignment with,
right,
and you're gonna enjoy working with, and that's super, super important. So, kind of considering some of the challenges and a lot of the benefits, what do you want our listeners to kind of take away from this conversation to be more authentic in their work, whether they're starting their own business, they're in their own business, or they're working for someone else?
I think it helps to step back and ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to do it? Am I doing it because this is important to me, or I am compelled to do this? Because none of us are going to have like perfect jobs or perfect businesses. There's lots of stuff I do every day that I don't particularly like doing, but is necessary to run my business. But the question I keep asking myself when I step back is, do I still enjoy doing what I'm doing? Do I feel like I can do my best work in the circumstances? And do I want to be here? Mm-hmm. Because if there's a no to any of those questions, then I need to dig in deeper and see what's going on and see if it's fixable or if it's endemic and it's something that's just telling me, hey, bad, no touch. But I think if you just give yourself, first place in things, like your job is to take care of yourself, because if you aren't, you are unable to do your best work. You are unable to run the business the way you want to. You're unable to serve others. So take care of yourself first. Make sure that you're doing okay, and then you will have more to give others.
I love that. Just give yourself first place in things, right? Just kind of keep that in mind. I think that's great advice. And kind of rounding out the rainbow section of our interview, I'm curious, in your business, what might be one way that you're giving back to LGBT communities?
I know that there are certain communities, particularly within comics, where people have not been given a voice before because there have been so many gatekeepers. And when I have a client who is trans or a woman of color or queer, one of the things that I try, and they're, they have shared that with me. One of the things I try to do is make time in my schedule. And even if it's not a situation where I am the right fit for them from a representation standpoint, like I'm not the right lawyer for them, or I genuinely do not have the time to be a lawyer, I do try to at least make enough time to talk with them, to provide resources, to point them towards other places. I'm not always successful, going back to that thing, I make mistakes all the time, but I do try to ensure that I am passing on what I got as a younger person from the queer adults I know, which was they would take time out for me. They would talk to me, they would listen to me, and that they would share what they had learned to a certain extent. And I know from my experience that didn't require, somebody to be there all the time. Sometimes it really was just having a conversation or having somebody who said, "Oh, I see you. Here, I'm gonna pluck you out for a second, and I'm gonna talk to you about this thing. I'm gonna give you this piece of advice."
Yeah,
I try to do that.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. I think that's huge. And when you were talking about time and giving your time, I was channeling Oprah. I listen to her Super Soul Sundays, and she's always like, time is our greatest resource that we can give to ourselves. And I think that that's huge, right? Like recognizing that, some LGBT folks, especially folks at the margins who may need legal support, and even that might not be your area of expertise, just the fact that you're willing to listen, to acknowledge, to hear some of the challenges that folks might be going through, and then pointing them in the right direction. It's incredible. And it's these kind of small things that can really help our communities out. So I just, again, want to thank you for doing that. And with that, I want to shift a little bit to mindset, business mindset,
okay,
boss mindset, whatever you want to call it. And kind of going back to when you started your blog, maybe, when you knew you had something to say, and you, I don't know how you started WordPress, whatever the thing might be, to put your thoughts and ideas online. How did you get around the imposter complex that often pops up around, I'm not ready, or I'm not good enough, or whatever the thing might be? How did you get around it if it existed for you?
I think part of it was my wife is very encouraging. So she was sort of sitting there saying, "No, do it. I think the other thing that helped was I have a lot of friends who were publishing webcomics at the time. And the piece of advice that they gave each other consistently was stick to a weekly schedule. Create a schedule and just stick to it. And it doesn't mean that each week you are posting your very best work that has ever occurred. You are just getting in the habit of doing. And getting in the habit of doing can help you get over that imposter syndrome. The other thing that I have learned over the course of time is that the imposter syndrome never really goes away. So part of it is just making friends with it and being like, oh, okay, cool. There you are again. Awesome. I don't really want to see you right now, but I guess we're hanging out.
Yep.
And to know that that is something that has come up and gone away before. So chances are it's going to go away again.
Yeah. So what do you do in your business when you get stuck? Is there someone that you turn to? Do you go online? Like,
I have a couple people that I depend on, just sort of like as my go-to folks. I have a friend, a former guest of your show, Karanda Adair.
Who's amazing.
She is. She's wonderful. But we're accountability partners for each other. So we check in with each other every other week on our business. How are you doing? How are your goals? What's going on? But the other thing that I kind of got in the habit of doing when I was a young lawyer, and I continue to do now, is that when I get stuck, and right now I'm in a place where I'm considering a couple different things, I will reach out to people and kind of do like an interview tour. I pick a bunch of different people that I want to talk to and say, hey, I'm thinking of this thing. What do you think? And it usually takes me a while to get there because I usually have to get over myself, right? But it tends to help. And I have tried, and I will continue to try, to not just pick people that know me really well. I have found it to be helpful to find somebody who I'm friendly with or that knows enough about me that I'm not going to have to explain what I do, but who doesn't know me particularly well, because they're then not invested in like giving me the advice I want to hear. They're really just responding to the questions that I'm asking. And that is incredibly helpful.
Yeah. So I'm curious about this idea of the interview tour. That's the first that I've ever heard of, an approach to kind of getting over an area where you're stuck in business. And so what does that look like? Do you find people online? Are these mostly folks in community that might be a couple of degrees of separation?
They're usually people that I know. So they're usually folks that I've had some interaction with. I've occasionally reached out to people that I just know from online and say, hey, can I talk to you about something real quick? I'm sort of thinking about how to do a thing. But usually it's somebody I know, and usually it's sitting down and saying, all right, I need to figure this out. Who are 3 people that I can talk to about that thing? And then go out and talk to them. And sometimes they don't, sometimes it's just, hey, would you like to have coffee? And I know I'm doing an interview, trying to get information about something, but they may not. To me, the important and the helpful part is getting different perspectives and getting over keeping it all in my head, because I am real bad at that. I am real bad at just staying in my head when there is something that I'm chewing on, and just chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing. And what I find is I just come up with the same answers over and over again, and that isn't helpful.
And what's that push for you? It sounds like asking for help might be hard.
Not my best quality.
Yeah. And so
I have a lovely smile.
You do. It's nice to be interviewing someone in the studio. Yes, I can vouch for that. Like when you know that you need help, and you know that you're self-aware, you don't really like asking for it. What's that final push? Can you kind of walk us through the mental exercise there?
For me, it's usually when I notice that I have been uncomfortable about something for an extended period of time. Unfortunately, because I'm not great at asking for help, usually discomfort is the thing that indicates, oh, hey, you need to get outside of your head. And sometimes that's something that I notice really quickly, and other times it's not. But yeah, usually it's, oh, I've been complaining about this for a while now. I've thought a lot about it. It's not going away.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And you had mentioned, so you're surrounded by a lot of community that helps, right? Like you've got this office mate who's in the same industry as you. You've got Karanda, who is kind of your accountability buddy. Are you part of any masterminds, or do you have a mentor that also helps you in business?
I have done masterminds in the past, and it has been incredibly helpful just to, again, get different perspectives from people and learn from other people who are doing different things. I don't have a mentor at this point right now, and that's something that I've been thinking a lot about. Like, why don't I have a mentor? Yeah. Why have I not done that thing? So right now, no, but in the past, definitely, I have had mentors at different stages of my career, and it's been really helpful to be able to watch somebody do what I am doing, and then ask them questions, ask them advice. Am I doing the right things? Hey, I just tried this. What do you think? And people who will tell me straight up, like, oh, you screwed that up. That was a screw up. Yeah. You can't do that again. Like, for real. Don't do that again. Right. Which, again, doesn't feel great, but I haven't done it again. And
that's how you learn, right? Like, you were mentioning mistakes. Welcome to the club of being human, right? That's me and everyone that I know. And those mistakes are kind of like information points of like, okay, like I'm on the path of learning and I'm growing and it's okay. Mm-hmm. Right. And the mentors can absolutely help with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is a really good conversation, and I think we can continue to talk for a couple more hours, and we won't, I promise. We are now going into our bonus round where we'll have the chance to get to know Katie just a little bit better, gain some insights on how we can bring our whole selves to work, and then learn one way that we can stay in touch with Katie after our conversation. All right, Katie, are you ready for some quick fire questions?
As ready as I'm going to be. Let's do this.
Okay. All right. So if this is applicable, do you have a mantra or a quote that you reference that helps you stay motivated in your business?
Oh God, oh God, oh God.
It could be that.
Let's make it that. It's that.
I love it. Okay. And can you share one personal habit that helps you master yourself and your business?
Journaling.
Yeah.
Journaling.
Do you do that every day?
No, I usually do it once a week.
Okay. Nice. And name one thing that you readily delegate in your business to stay focused on what you're good at.
Why do you ask me these questions? Ask me something I'm good at. I don't really delegate anything. Yeah. Which is bad.
Yeah. So you're a solopreneur?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just me, myself, and I.
What's your fantasy? Like, if you had like a huge staff, what would be like the first thing that you would farm out to someone else?
Email.
Yes, right?
Email.
Yeah.
I hate email.
Yeah.
Actually, this is not a plug, but it's just something I started using, and it's sort of like delegating, but without a person. SaneBox. Have you tried that?
No.
It basically helps you divide up your own inbox, and it's like, hey, Katie, you've received 14 emails that are only mildly important, so we're going to put them over here and just tell you about them once a day.
Nice.
And that has actually helped considerably.
Yeah.
So that's like a mini step towards delegation.
Nice. Yeah. I use Outlook, which I feel like I'm so 1992. And there's like the kind of the focus and the other section. I don't know how that happened. I didn't set it up. So that's somehow helpful for me. But yes, I think I would farm that out too. So 2 more questions for you. Right. And these are, well, maybe this question might be a little bit hard, but I promise the last question is easy. So can you share one piece of advice to inspire the next generation of outbosses to take that first entrepreneurial leap?
It's being yourself. One of the pieces of advice I got when I was really young, I was in theater and I was talking to this actress who I was working with. She was also a lesbian. And I was talking about feeling insecure and feeling just a little bit too self-conscious. And she was like, I got a trick for that. What's the trick? And she was like, always wear underwear that just makes you feel really good.
Yes.
So like, no matter what situation you're in, you can think like, I'm wearing really good underwear right now.
Yes.
And honestly, it helps. Like, I like wearing funny socks for the same reason. Like, you don't know anything about me. I've got French bulldogs on my feet.
Yeah. Very cool.
So do something that's always just for you.
I love that. That is great advice. Thank you. Thank you. So I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I think we're going to have you come back at some point.
All right.
Maybe next year we'll chat again. But for right now, can you let us know how we can stay in touch with you and learn more about your business?
Absolutely. So my website is workmadeforhire.net. the .net is important because that's what all the cool kids are using these days.
Yes.
It's not true. It's just what I use. And then on Twitter, I am _Katie, Katie, _Lane, Lane. And that is because there's a romance writer named Katie Lane, and there is a porn star named Katie Lane,
Okay.
and there's a quilt maker named Katie Lane. So
and
I'm
not to
the
be
attorney.
confused with Portland's Katie Lang.
Exactly.
Which I was so afraid I would say in the beginning of the interview. So maybe we'll get her on the show at some point. But
I am none of those others.
Yes.
I am just me. But
you are an original, and we're very, very, very happy to have you on the show. So Outbosses, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. It is always my privilege to connect with you and so many inspiring outbosses like Katie Lane. Not Katie Lang. Okay, so and for details from today's conversation, please check out the show notes. We'll have all of the ways to connect with Katie's business. You can find that at www.outentrepreneur.com. As a next step, please subscribe to the podcast. Consider leaving a rating and review in iTunes. That's how people can find out about the show. And be sure to share this episode with a friend or a loved one. And for now, keep being your authentic selves 100% of the time.